What is a berry?
So, a berry would be someone who knows far too much about something in punishing detail than anyone sort of gives a shit about. So I guess you see it in hobbies, classic car world, that sort of thing. In my mind, the term berry came from one of my car clubs that I was in, where would use the term berry to describe some old dude that comes up to you at the petrol station and says something like, "Oh, a 1980 Sunny SGX, that was the year they came out with the oval port manifold." And they're just like, "Was it? Cool." Like, nobody gives a shit. Or maybe they do. But like, you're just a berry. Like, you just sit in your shed, learning all your berry facts about your berry things. So I guess through here, I'd call this the amp room. My interest is old New Zealand made amps. For a long time I was really into old Marshalls because my idea of what was cool was just whatever Slash was using, as embarrassing as that is now. So these two amps I used a lot for a band I was in Wellington called Mother's Dearest. My setup would have been guitar, 3 or 4 rat pedals into a big Jensen 9100. In that same band I was using this one as well, the old Jensen Bass 75. Everyone and their grandparents have one of these in a garage. Look in enough garages and you'll find the old Yamaha Electones and the Jensen bass head. And when you fire them up for the first time, we used to say it smelled like someone jamming a soldering iron into an old vacuum bag as all the dust kind of burns off the tubes. This amp exploded halfway through our recording of a song called Chemtrails Killed My Daughter, inspired by my own daughter. And I haven't fixed it, so there it is.
So Dominic, what about your favourite amp?
Well, none of these ones are plugged in, but the one that I am using the most at the moment out here was one I found on Trade Me. It's a Fender PA version of a twin reverb, I guess. And what is awesome about this is you'll see with all this synth gear and all this crap and all these pedals, because it's a PA head and you would have had mics and bass and everything running through it, you've got all these inputs. So you can kind of turn it into a sort of master noise station. And someone spent a lot of money on it at some time. I only paid about $300 for it. And someone spent a lot of money making it pretty bulletproof. And so when bands come down to Christchurch, like Gussie and Ezra from Earth Tongue, and they need to borrow an amp, this is generally the one I'll lend out because I don't really have much confidence in anything else lasting the distance. A lot of stuff just explodes. I mean, this one probably exploded about 8 years ago, and it's just my background at the moment. So yeah, 70s Fender PA 100, Secret Weapon, and now I've told everyone about them, and they're not going to be Secret Weapon anymore.
So how did this all start?
So you got me thinking when you said you might put that question to me, how did this all start? And there is a moment in time that I can point to, and I would have been, I guess, 12 or 13 years old, on holiday with my family in Wellington, heading to my Uncle Tony's house. And he lived sort of on the coast in Wellington, in the inlet to the harbour, where the ferries come in, just close to one of the gun emplacements. So we went up to that flat, and I remember he had a couch made of egg crates. And I sort of wandered off into one of the spare rooms, and in that spare room was just shit everywhere. broken old New Zealand amps, old Jansons, old guns, even some of the old Janson guitars, just like drawers and drawers of pickups and bridges and bits and necks hanging off the wall and everything, and it was incredible. I just looked around, and I would have been only a year or two into playing guitar, and just this whole overload of all this gear really started something in me. I truly thought that it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. And so my guitar teacher at the time started making jokes that I'd show up to practice every week with a different guitar, because our routine would be for my brother and I to get the buy, sell and exchange on a Friday morning. I'd look at Game Boys and guitars, Tim would be into his radio systems and cars, and yeah, I'd buy another piece of crap every week, and my guitar teacher would say, hey, how about you sell all your bits of crap and just buy one really nice guitar? And that was unacceptable. So I got lots of guitars. When I was teaching guitar, kids and their parents would say, what's sort of the most important thing about learning guitar? And I'd say to them, well, you've just got to accumulate as many guitars as possible. That's the most important thing, because all the inspiration, technique, practice, talent in the world won't do any good if you've got nothing to play it on. So as many guitars as you possibly can, but I do like old stuff. But the whole cult of vintage stuff it's just chronically bullshit. Like, it is all rubbish. Like, this would be a early 70s Telecaster bass. Pickup sounds like shit. 3-bolt neck, so it doesn't stay in tune. Skunk stripes lifting. Previous owner said that the original butterscotch had started chipping off, so he went in very helpfully, got it horrendously refinished in this tobacco burst. Looks cool, but it's just kind of junk, More junk. It's just all so shit. Old 70s music, man. Absolutely butchered. Wrong bridge. Full of bog. Some Damasio super distortion in there. All cut up. Had a different neck on it at some point. So it's got the holes there. 3-bolt neck again, so it's all just rubbish. Rubbish. And yeah, like, some of these guitars are worth a little bit now, but honestly some of the best shit is just like worth nothing. I'm pretty sure this is a Strat copy that I found in a second-hand appliance shop in, I think it was Hanoi, on the way back from Pick-a-Part. It might be a Tokai, I don't know, but it's a really nice guitar, and that cost me $100. I used that as my main guitar for a long time. I walked about... We did a show in Dunedin, and after the show I walked about 2 hours to this house to pick up this guitar, which was the main bass that I used in Mother's Dearest in Wellington for a long time. So this is the stuff I'm sort of talking about. You leave them for a bit and you start getting mould up the fretboard and all sorts of stuff. But I used an all-seeing hand sticker. But I used this for a long time with Mother's Dearest, and the stage shows were quite full on, and so a lot of the dings and stuff are my own, which I'm quite proud of. It's just got a story, it's just got history. This guitar was built by the same dude that built them for Randy Rhoads, I think. That's what I was told. So this here's a Randy Rhoads Flying V. I've had it for probably 10 years and like never played it. But look at that headstock. You could kill someone with that. Man. Probably the best playing guitar I own, but because it all works and because everything's fine and it plays really well and it's all lovely and amazing, I'm just sort of not interested. I just want stuff that kind of messes with me and you kind of have to wrestle. But also, if I showed up to a show with that, like, no. So the last guitar I'll show you is probably one of the most important ones to me. I would have bought this one from Cash Converters when I was 14 or 15. I worked out many years later that it originally belonged to Nick Vassar, who runs the Darkroom now. But he didn't have it for anywhere near as long as I've had it, so I've had that for maybe up 17 years now. And this was the guitar that was like my shred sort of era guitar. So I did all the dumb stuff. I filed down the nut to get the action as low as possible. You can see I've had to boost it up with a bit of paper. Pretty proud of all that fretwear, most of which is probably mine. Rusty as strings because it's the first time I've opened the case in about a year probably. But this is a 1979 Ibanez Roadster when Ibanez were doing much better stuff than the American companies. And there was just a lot of and horrendous fret buzz. I just wanted as low action as possible because I was just turning the distortion up all the way. Because if you're not just using shit tons of distortion, you're just compensating with good technique and actually playing the song properly. And that's just a waste of my time. And then you realise that just playing fast is dumb and you just wasted your life. But man, I need to get some new strings for this. This is a cool guitar. This is really cool. So I do come from a family of hoarders, absolutely. We have stuff, Mum and Dad's house, the classic, you can't fit any cars in the garage because of all the rubbish. My Uncle Tony, all of that stuff, he would talk about going to all the dump shops. A lot of the stuff he found in the dump shop, there's an amp right behind you that belongs to him that he got from Wanaka Waste Busters. So on one of these visits to my Uncle Tony, he gave me this record, Surface of the Earth. This record basically is static, and he said to me that their whole philosophy of recording was to go somewhere, to lean a guitar up against the amp, let it feed back, go and get a drink, and when the amps exploded, that was the end of the show. And this was another moment of like, this is incredible. So this was recorded at Thistle Hall in Wellington between 95 and 96. And maybe you wouldn't call my Uncle Tony a Barry because he just didn't give a shit about the gear. He had a lot of gear, but that wasn't what it was about for him. So I listened to this a lot, just coming out of like a phase where I was playing a lot of guitar, trying to play as fast as I could, going through my God of Wank thing, listening to Steve Vai and Tony McAlpine and shit, and then realising that you could just release static and feedback perfectly legitimately was a moment for me as well. So it's just this. I think there's something wrong with the stereo, but no, this is just it. Just a whole record of this. Be great in like an art gallery installation or something. About 40 minutes of this, we can keep on going. My uncle tells a story about how a whole bunch of these pressings that were unsold he left at his dad's house. His dad ended up taking them to St. Vincent de Paul. And some record dude found them. And my uncle says that they ended up on some like overseas website selling for like $300 each or something, but maybe it's real, maybe it's not. So yeah, just hanging out in Thistle Hall, Cuba Street, leaning your guitar up against the amp, just recording what comes out. But I think what you end up finding is that you have all this super flash gear, you can make all the noises, you have all this stuff that, you know, was the absolute dream when I was 15. And then once you've got it all, actually, you just sort of want to make noise, really. So I've got an old 70s reel-to-reel, old record player, running through an old mixer, and then this here is a rotating speaker assembly that's come out of an old home organ, and I've done a very, very safe wiring job into a step-down transformer. So, say for example we get this record going, get it running through the mixer, bring up that level. Oh, first we have to turn on this old school intercom amplifier to drive the speaker in the Leslie. Doesn't want to work. Fuck's sake. So now, finally got the record running through the speaker behind the rotating drum. Get the drum going. Give it a bit of modulation. So the collecting probably seriously started last year of high school. I sort of had a wee room out the back of mum and dad's that I progressively filled up with a wall of amps. That was kind of my dream. Pedals were easy enough, they don't take up much space, and probably started my two sort of first serious guitars, an old 90s Gibson Explorer and a 70s Ibanez Roadster, main guitars at the time. Slowly building up my collection. First tube amp came from Cash Converters Linwood, an old Jansen 620 for $150. That probably started my love of old things, and then from there, really when I moved to Wellington in 2012, it didn't become so much about getting or having, it was about maintaining. Any collector will tell you the getting is easy, the having can be kind of tricky. So, of course, moving out of home, I had an instant storage issue. There were amps that were in sheds that by the creek that would flood. And so I'd be in Wellington on the phone to mum and dad, telling them to rush out to check if my amps were still out of the water. Storage units where guitars just basically sat and rusted. In Wellington, like everyone in Wellington, I lived in a shoebox, so I was pretty much sleeping on top of my amps, continually making my bed higher, so I had more storage space for pedals and shit underneath. And then moving back to Christchurch, being able to consolidate everything in one space, clearing out all the storage units, getting everything back from garages around the country, all of a sudden I realised how much shit there was, and you couldn't really move in this room. There was no space to walk. In the last couple of months I have got rid of a lot of stuff, and also I've managed to make these display cabinets which have been in my mind as a concept for probably about 10 years. I knew I had to because there were pedals that were just getting damaged by the sheer weight of pedals on top of them, banana boxes in the corner, and to have everything in one place is very, very satisfying, finally. So, I don't actually use any of this stuff ever, really. So, this amp here was part of a full stack in February 2011. The earthquake happened and this fell down, and I haven't turned it on since the earthquake. So while you're here, I'm gonna plug it in and see if 10 years later it goes. I'm kind of just expecting it just to work. It would be funny if it just like exploded, but I just don't think it will. It's not that I'm scared of turning it on, I just haven't ever had the inclination. Lights are on. Lights are on. Oh my goodness. Like my first real amp that I saved up for was a Marshall JCM 900. So there's a very particular character and tone about that sort of era of amps. Was 1987 that just takes me back to my bedroom at 17, because that was the sound that I wanted. That was the sound that was the dream, and now I'm just like, Who wants to sound like Slash? Fuck.
Oh no.
It's dying!
Oh.
We got one good run out of it. Other collectors, of course, hate hearing that you basically don't have the time or space to look after your collection properly. And yeah, there were absolutely cases of moths laying a whole pile of eggs in the insulation in one of my 70s Fender pyramid cabinets. Absolutely, there was opening up boxes that had got damp and literally all of the paint flaking off the pedal in my hand. So yeah, I knew that I had to get stuff out of banana boxes, and I actually started all of this incredible shelving solution is all crap I found for free on Facebook Marketplace. This one I found on a building site with the glass door and stuff, and I piled it into the back of my van by myself, sort of putting my back out in the process, and it didn't quite fit. I didn't have anything to tie it down, so I just drove down Q2 Drive with the boot in my van open and my daughter falling asleep in the seat beside me while the van filled up with fumes. So it's been a long time, this idea of me doing this sort of custom display solution and moving into finally being able to have my own space for everything. Yeah, I just spent 2 days with a drill and a skill saw and just cut it all to size. And then I just come out here with my deck chair and I'll just sit there and I'll just look at it, you know? And I did try and get like little lights going and stuff to make it even more cool, but it doesn't quite work. Can't quite see it. But the problem is, when you have this much stuff, people don't come in and see the one or two cool things. They just see, it's just too much. Anything awesome in big enough quantities just becomes a liability. And really people's comment is just, I just like the colours. And I just like the colours. It's like collecting Matchbox cars or Hot Wheels when you're little. You just like the colours. And these are pretty much the same. You know, just driving them around like Hot Wheels. Yeah. It's all the same. So like, I try not to get too involved in a lot of the wank around the vintage guitar pedal collecting community, but it sort of is there. I guess it's like not all vintage stuff is great. A lot of it is pretty shit. I like to think I like the history just as much as like the sound, and I think really the Tube Screamer has got to be the best example of just how much wank goes on in pedaldom. You know, like people who say the 808's the best, people who say, oh no, the 9's a little bit more compressed, a little bit more gain, I like it. The TS10, all the John Mayer fanboys jizz over. TS5, which is probably like the least exciting of the bunch, but already they're starting to get expensive. And yeah, even like super rare ones like the Super Tube Screamer, they all sound the same. Like, that's just it. And this one doesn't even have, you know, I hate that I know this, but it doesn't have the JRC 4558 chip. It's got one of the TL chips. Doesn't matter. Nobody cares. It all sounds the same. And you just got to check yourself, because you might find yourself playing a white on black Strat into an 808 and just becoming a total blues dad. And nobody wants that.
I feel like I'm on Courtney Place reading cinema, 5 p.m. that one guy with the Jim Beam Stratocaster.
Yeah, fully. So I started getting interested in the pedal side of things in particular, and in the beginning, Trade Me was great. You could find all sorts of stuff, and it was pretty easy to find real cool pieces. And then the sort of golden age of Trade Me started to decline a bit, and there was an opportunity in 2018 for me to head to Japan at the tail end of a trip to Vietnam and China. I was there for 2 weeks, and the idea was that I'd just hit as many of these cash converter type shops as possible, getting all the sick made in Japan gear, all the old Boss gear, all the old Ibanez stuff, stuff that I loved, and had no plan. And of course, with no plan, it was going to be a disaster, but it was kind of amazing as well. So my plan was I'd go to a different part of Tokyo, go into a hotel, get up in the morning, find one of these cash converter shops on a map, take a train out there, and then, because I had no other way of doing things, I would walk to these shops. And because I just had no idea how big Tokyo was, what looked quite small on a map could easily be a 3 or 4 hour walk. In my jandals, walking to this shop, maybe I'd find a pedal, maybe I wouldn't, maybe I'd find 3 or 4, and then walking all the way back to the station in the heat, in my jandals. I think I lost about 8 kg over the course of the 2 weeks. Didn't shit for 5 days. But I'd arrive back at the hotel with a bag full of pedals. And as I got further and further through my 2 weeks, I would discard more and more of my clothes, what was in my bag, to fit more pedals in. I ended up buying an old rack case that I filled up with maybe 30-40 pedals, and went to the post office and just sent it home. Of course, again, because I didn't have any transport, I was pushing it using a bag trolley from the hotel that I was at, about 2 k's to the post shop. So all these ridiculous situations, which meant that at the end of it, coming back, maybe I'd bought somewhere around 100 pedals, and the idea was that I could sell them to offset the cost of the trip, which I could, and I was able to keep some of the more sort of choice things that I found on my trip. And from there I was like, sweet, let's do it again. But of course I'm not going to Japan anytime soon, unfortunately. It doesn't take much to get like really sucked into all of the little things and wanting every single different version of what is essentially exactly the same pedal. So just starting with a classic, everyone knows the Boss DS1. This would be a late 70s one. Some things that make it a little bit different. The edges are a whole lot more radius than the later ones. The jacks are flush and have washers. Different paint technique. You can actually see the brush strokes. This one would have had silver screw and the very early TA71 chip in it. And another quick way to tell that it's a very early one is the D in DS1 is underneath the T in distortion. You'll see in the later ones, the D's actually under the I. So moving on from the late 70s version to just like a 80s made in Japan one. Different knobs, of course. Same one again, but with a Monty Allen's mod. So I can't sell any of them because then I wouldn't have the set. This one here I hold on to because a lot of people will say the made in Taiwan ones sound different to the made in Japan ones. Some do. The very first made in Taiwan ones do not. But then in the 2000s when they changed to the Mitsubishi chip, yeah, these ones do sound different. And this one I got signed by Steve Vai, and it's got some more signatures on it, but I can't remember. Oh, they're from Dragon Force. So Herman Lee and Sam Top. Maybe this one probably sounds like shit, but it's signed by Dragon Force, so I have to keep it. Yeah.
So what about the heavy metals?
Oh, they're all the same. So this was probably the coolest thing I found in Japan. This one here is probably late 70s, early 80s. Very, very early block logo, MXR Phase 90. You can tell it's an old one because there's no LED and there's no power jack. Still got the old script logo on the casing. And probably even more excitingly really, it came with the original owner's manual, warranty card, suggested settings. This is the sort of stuff that, as a Barry, it's kind of more exciting than the pedal itself. And it was sold in the shop as a new one, just as a reissue. So I guess just because it looked so mint, they had no idea that it was a super old vintage one. And that one just stays in its box and never comes out, because if I scratched that pedal, I would be most upset. This was all going. Why is it not going? Oh, that's why, mate.
Oh, there we go.
I wanted to talk about this synth stuff because there's part of my collecting and the stuff that I like that's all about like what was sort of physically possible at the time. So this is a pre-MIDI synth thing, and this isn't called a guitar, it's called a controller. So this is a controller, and this is a synthesizer. And it's all pre-digital, pre-MIDI, all analog. And so I love this idea of, in an age where you can just get any sound you want, mucking around with stuff that was absolutely at the limit of what the technology could do at the time. So this is something that I've only seen one for sale, and I bought it and I've been mucking around with it quite a lot. So the serial number on this says that this would have been in 1981, sold as a set, and if I break this cable, I'm screwed, because it's like some old like printer cable or something. And reason why there's so many connections is with this hex pickup thing, it's sending individual string signals to the synth module, which you can turn off and on per string. As well as that, it's sending a direct signal which you can mix in to go through the envelope filter and the big muff and things like that. And as well as that, you can control your envelope, these controls here, on your guitar. So for the time, it would have been nuts, and I am a bit terrified that should any of that circuitry in there fry itself, nobody's gonna know how to fix it. Made by Roland, of course, who makes all the Boss pedals as well. So sick piece of history for pedal nerd freak person. One of my favourite bits of kit at the moment.
Alright, Dominic, so What's your plans for all this stuff?
All this guitar stuff. I'm done with guitar stuff, man. I'm bored. It's boring. I'm just gonna take my keyboard show on the road. James, this one is for you. You who are my fire, my one desire, belief. When I say I want it that way, tell me why ain't nothing but a heartache. Tell me why ain't nothing but a mistake. Girl, tell me why I never wanna hear you say I want it that way. Are we into worlds apart? Can lead to your heart when you say I want it that way. Tell me why ain't nothing but a heartache. Tell me why ain't nothing but a mistake. Girl, tell me why I never wanna hear you say I want it that way. I want it that way. Tell me why ain't nothing Maybe I should actually use these things.